All right, hello everyone. My name is Colton Cockrell. I'm a certified financial fiduciary and independent financial advisor with Share McKinley Group. It is about noon, and I wanted to grab a cup of coffee, and I wanted a friend to join me. So with me, I have Brian Worrell with the Worrell team of Remax First Class. So Brian, thank you for accepting my coffee invite.
Well, thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Mm. Cheers, bud.
Hey, so Brian, there's a lot of people always have questions about real estate, whether they're just very general or very simple or very complex. So what I wanted to do is take 30 minutes and just kind of ask you some questions about real estate, and just kind of put you on the spot, honestly. You up for
Let's
the
do it.
challenge?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, Brian. Well, let's just go ahead and jump in. Okay. So my first question I have for you, and this is, answer how you may, but I'm just curious to hear your answer here. Do I need a real estate agent?
Well, you don't need a real estate agent, but I think you'd be well advised to have one. My job is to act in my client's best interest always. And so if you have somebody that's representing you and doing a good job, then your outcome is going to be better. Whether we're talking about from a negotiation standpoint, finding the right home, finding the right buyer, and ensuring the entire process goes smoothly.
Okay, and so you actually said something that I say all the time. So as a certified financial fiduciary, I'm required to have my client's best interest in mind. And you just said best interest. So let me ask you this: are you a fiduciary?
I am. I am a fiduciary. That is one of the things that I feel like sometimes agents lose sight of, that they are always supposed to act in their client's best interest. And so that's something that we take very seriously and always remind our clients that that is our job. Sometimes that it goes to a direction where I'm advising my clients to do something they don't want to do. And so at that point, I would remind them, hey, I think that what you want to do is maybe not in your best interest, and here's why. And we kind of have that discussion and carry everything forward. Uh, so.
Yeah, and you're just advising them. No, that's great. Another question that I'm curious about is what life events cause a person to start looking for a new home?
Well, there's many life events. There's having children. There's having children move out. There's when I first started into real estate, I thought this was always going to be happy. Uh, I was much younger back then, naive a bit, and so I've definitely come to realize that there's death, there's divorce, there's job loss, job transfer. Sometimes people are excited to move. Sometimes they're dreading moving. And so it gives me an opportunity to be there to basically minister to people in a way and just help them through a very difficult process. It's not always fun. It's many times stressful. Now, that being said, there are a lot of fun and exciting aspects to buying a home, but it's just not always that way.
Yeah.
So.
And so this is actually the number one question I wanted to ask. However, I wanted to kind of give you some softballs before I asked it. So Brian, how do real estate agents get paid?
How do we get paid? Well, we get paid typically by a commission that is based on a sales price. And typically the person paying that is the seller. So if you're a buyer, there are occasions where the buyer will pay commission, but never with the Worrell team. We will always be representing your best interest as a buyer for no cost. And so whether you're buying a new home, there's no cost to have representation, or if you're buying a resale, there's no cost. So yeah, that's a tricky one because I know that a lot of times when a buyer calls me, they're like, do I want to work with this person because I don't know how much this is going to cost or what's involved. And so that's a perfectly normal, frequently asked question.
So you're encouraging people who are looking for a real estate agent, especially if they're a buyer, to ask that question.
Oh, absolutely. That's a perfectly fair question. And so there are many occasions, especially when someone's going into new construction, when they walk into a model home, that I feel like they're sometimes encouraged, not to have representation. because they don't fully understand that it's free. Why would you not want someone to be in your corner if there's no cost?
Mm.
Um, so, yeah.
And okay, and so in saying that, I'm just curious. Um, we actually a while back we had a conversation about new homes and stuff like that. So whenever you are buying a new home, so something that was just constructed, what are things to look out for from the seller of the new home?
So the seller, the person that is an employee typically of the builder, is there to represent the builder's best interest, first and foremost. So they are not there to represent your best interest. Now, they do want to help the process. If you have a good salesperson that does a great job for the builder, then they're going to be customer service oriented and be trying to help you through the process. It's not like they're going to try to be getting in the way of the process. However, there's many aspects to the process, many times in the process that you want to have representation, from contract negotiations through inspections, walkthroughs, and it can be a very long process. And sometimes a buyer can go from contract to closing without any issues, or they might not realize that the way they were treated was not the customary way of doing things. So sometimes there are fees or just aspects of the process that don't go in favor of the buyer, but the buyer might not know any different.
So that leads me is a good segue to my next question. What is the timetable from showing interest in a home to actually moving in?
Well, this is the $1 million question. So if you currently own a home, then typically you'll want to sell that home first. Now, not everybody needs to sell in order to buy. And many times, if you're buying your first home, perhaps you're even renting a house or an apartment, and you're going to need to pay attention to the contract language as far as how to exit that lease. So there's different variables that happen on the front end. On the back end, if you're buying a resale, an existing home, then typically contract to closing is 30 days to 45 days.
Okay.
However, if you're building, if you're building from the ground up, it could take 6 to 8 months. And you always need to be mindful of the fact that with builders, that the target closing date is just a target closing date. It is sometimes missed by a long shot. And so when you're giving notice to your apartment complex, or when you're selling your home and trying to time the transition from one house directly into the next, it can get pretty tricky. So there's ways that we in the contract that we can protect you and make sure that the process goes as smooth as possible.
And you did just mention something that I think is kind of curious. So you said contract language. So I'm assuming, I'm not assuming, I know that there's legal aspects of, moving into a home or selling a home, buying a home, whatever it may be. So I know that you actually live with an attorney who is your wife. So tell me how that situation works. So being able to have
Best roommate.
yeah, there you go. Having a roommate who's an attorney.
Yeah, right. My wife is an amazing person. She's part of our team. She went to Harvard Law School. She's worked for every federal judge in Houston, and she's got a lot of experience in real estate law. So, and in addition, she has a lot of experience with doing wills and estates and just a pretty wide range of legal expertise. So at the Worrell team, we try our best to be go-givers. We want to give whatever we can of value to our clients. So whether it's about real estate or if it's not even about real estate, my clients have kind of a free, quick legal access hotline. And so a story from a recent transaction that we did, we had a first-time home buyer that was in an apartment lease, and they were getting out of that apartment lease following the rules of the lease. They had a reletting fee they were happy to pay, but the apartment leasing manager at the apartment office thought differently, and they basically tried to bully my client out of or tried to prevent them from being able to break their lease. So my wife was able to talk to the apartment's corporate attorney and take care of this quickly. But I think a lot of times people do get bullied from apartment complexes or other, landlords. Um, if you have a question about contract language, if you have just any general legal question, the Worrell team has an attorney on hand. So one thing that's really important to note is that real estate agents are not allowed to give legal advice. So we're pretty uniquely situated as one of the only real estate teams that has an attorney.
Yeah. And so but it is very beneficial for a real estate agent to work closely with an attorney. And you so happen to, like you said, have one on your team. That's great. Now let me ask you this. So how much money do you typically need to buy a new home?
Well, if you have cash to fully pay for the home, that's probably the best situation, potentially. Now, if you talk to your financial advisor, I recommend Colton. Call Colton. They may think otherwise. There's probably lots of different ways you could spend that money rather than paying cash. However, one thing that I find interesting is, sort of the American way is to spend as much as you can, even if you can't afford it. That's been the way for a long time, I feel like. So I do feel like the bigger the down payment, the better. There are VA loans where you can do 0 down. There's FHA loans where you can do 3.5% down. There's conventional loans where you can do 5% down or more. One target that is on a lot of buyers' minds is to try to avoid paying private mortgage insurance, which is just an extra fee. If you can get to the 20% equity mark, if you could put 20% down, you're going to be in a much better position in the long run. So the more down, the better. I'm a firm believer that you don't necessarily need to have a house payment for the rest of your life. It is possible to have it paid off. It just doesn't seem possible because when you start out with a 30-year loan and you're like, let's see, how old am I right now? Plus 30. That sounds like it's never going to happen. And so, but there's ways to accelerate paying off a 30-year loan. So we discussed that with all of our clients.
And so what other factors come into play, like credit score and things like that?
Yeah, credit score is important. And we have recommended lenders that we can put a buyer in touch with that can help somebody who may be struggling with their credit. Hey, life happens and people go through divorces, like I said, and they go through job loss. And so, having perfect credit is not a judgment on your character, or if you don't have perfect credit, it's not a judgment on your character, but it's something that we can help kind of guide you through the process of making sure that you are capable of getting a loan. So lenders typically look at credit score. They're going to look at debt to income ratio and other factors to make sure that you can afford the house comfortably, that you're not going to default on the loan. And so I'm pretty sarcastic in some areas, but I try not to be with real estate. I try to be very, serious and not tease my clients. But, I always say, do you want to go on a vacation? Do you want to be able to buy food? Do you want to be able to buy clothing? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then we need to make sure that you're not setting yourself up to have your house payment be 100% of your budget. Sounds simple, but in days of the past, lenders would tell you what the maximum house you could qualify for is, and I'm not sure they cared whether you had food. And so
really what you're saying is you need to have a budget and know how much you can afford to spend on a house before you walk into it.
Absolutely. And to be able to save for the future.
And so this is going to be a 2-part question, and they really don't have anything to do with each other, but you just making things come out of my brain here. So tell me, what is the importance of a pre-approval?
Okay. So a pre-approval letter, basically in my mind, it does 2 things. For the buyer, it's going to ensure that the buyer knows that they're shopping in the correct price range. That they're not, starting way up here with a house they think they can afford, and then they're getting taken down a notch. But the second thing that it does, which is also very important, is it helps the seller know that this buyer is actually a qualified buyer. So if the seller receives an offer from that buyer, we want to demonstrate that this buyer is capable of closing.
Hmm.
And so that's basically, it's going to, I'd say 99% of the time, it's going to be required before a seller will even consider your offer.
Okay, so that's important to know. So if you're gonna look at buying a home, you probably want to get pre-approved.
Absolutely.
And so now walk me through, and we kind of touched on this, but walk me through the real estate agent's role when it comes to buying a home. So walk me through the process.
Well, typically I'll ask what the buyer's timeline, what their goal is in terms of when they want to move into a house. And then from there I work backwards. So at that point I would find out if they have an apartment lease or if they have a home they need to sell. Or if they're moving in from out of state, or if there's other factors that come into play. Um, so we start by looking for homes online. Typically these days, there's a lot of great tools out there to find homes, and I have uh, some extra insider tools, that are pretty awesome for buyers to be able to use. Um, and so we start looking online. You look online at a house and you think, wow, this is the perfect house, I got to go buy it. And sometimes you get there and it is terrible, so you got to go look in person. Sometimes the pictures look terrible and you get there and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And so you never know based on uh, what the marketing efforts were online. So um, from finding that house to getting it into contract can take several days. But generally, the next step would be to do inspections. So we basically want to find out what we don't know yet about the true condition of the home, or there could be a factor to do with title, meaning trying to make sure that we know that the home has clear title. So um, the initial phase of the contract is, we call it the option period, but it's the legal term would be, as my wife would probably say, is your time for discovery. So we're going to try to figure out what we don't know. We'll have a seller's disclosure from the seller, but we want to figure out what else we don't know.
So
And there's several other hurdles that we got to get through before we get to closing.
so you're telling me that you don't just go unlock and lock the door?
That is correct. Uh, I am not just a door opener. I hope at some point, maybe early in a relationship with a new buyer, that may be how they perceive me. But as time progresses, hopefully they'll see the value that I bring, to representing their best interest.
So really, Brian, you're an advisor, is what you are. You're advising on the process, which is very beneficial, and
Absolutely.
I think that's great. Now let me kind of switch gears. Let me talk about the current market. So first and foremost, how are you servicing clients through COVID-19?
Well, first off, let me just say that in real estate, kind of life is going on. Um, there is an interesting factor between Harris County and Galveston County. In Harris County, I've been deemed essential, and in Galveston, I'm not. So I don't feel very needed in Galveston County. I feel like I could be just discarded. Uh, you know. Anyway, but basically, life is still happening. Houses are still getting shown. I'm still doing showings. We're just taking proper precautions where we're using gloves, we're using masks, we're using hand sanitizer, a lot of it, and just trying to be careful that we protect our clients and other buyers that come into a home. And so, there are people that are definitely pausing because they're not sure of what's happening. Um, some sellers that are not allowing showings because, their house is on the market, but they have to work from home or they have to do homeschooling. They're juggling so many things. And so in some cases, I question why they have their home on the market if they're not going to allow it to be shown. But, so anyway, showings are still happening. Closings are still happening. They're not at quite the same pace that they normally are at this time of year. But I basically believe there's a lot of pent up demand.
Mhm.
And so once people feel safe to go out, they're going to be getting out there and getting busy. So,
Okay. And what is the current state of the real estate market?
well, the real estate market is, I think, doing fine. If I look at my numbers over last year, personally, I can speak for my team. And for January, February, March, and April, we're significantly up over last year.
Mm.
So, and April's not even done. Um, Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen for May or June or moving forward. But I can tell you that typically in years where there is a recession or fears of recession or fears of layoff uh, that I've experienced personally in my career, the demand will shift from one part of the year to another. So when you go back to the mortgage crisis, 2008 timeframe, I had the busiest fourth quarter. The first quarter, I had a lot of transactions fall through, and I had a lot of questions about, is this the right career for me? at moments, because I had 15 transaction sides fall through in the first quarter, which is a lot. And so it started out to be an amazing first quarter, and kind of that fell apart. But the fourth quarter of that year was crazy busy in a time of year that's normally not busy. So I think there's just going to be a shift in the demand.
No, that's interesting. And what about inventory? What about buyers and sellers? Are they still out there? I know you kind of touched on that, but
Yeah, definitely. Buyers and sellers are still out there. I definitely have several buyers that tell me, "Hey, we're still coming to Texas, but we can't get there yet." And so that's why I know there's pent up demand. There's sellers that are saying, "We're still listing, but we need to wait a little while to get our house on the market." And so, but inventory levels are very low. Builders aren't building inventory right now. Um, a lot of builders are publicly traded, and they can't just prepare for the future. It's a really difficult thing to do for some of the builders who might be laying off people or not hiring certain crews to then also try to ramp up inventory. I feel like in many cases, builders are notorious for not having the inventory we need when we need it. So, and when we come out of this, from a construction standpoint, it could take 6 to 8 or even 9 months to ramp that inventory up. So I believe inventory will remain low because it's going to be a struggle to uh, to build it up from a new construction standpoint. But once people feel safe to get out there, resale inventory is going to ramp up. Buyers are going to ramp up. So that being said, I personally, I anticipate prices to actually go up. And so I think it's going to be a very healthy third and fourth quarter of the year.
and that's good to hear. Um, so now enough of the boring stuff. Let's have I'm just kidding. Totally joking. We're going to have a speed round now.
All
So
right.
Ryan, buckle up because I got a handful of questions I want to ask you, and you have to pick one. It's one or the other. It's not both, and it's not neither. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready, Colton.
Okay. You got some coffee. So, okay, here we go. First one, Lion King live action or Lion King animated?
Animated.
Okay. Bungee jumping or skydiving?
Bungee jumping.
Skiing or laying out at the beach?
Snow or water.
So snowboarding? Do you snowboard?
I snow ski.
Okay. Still, that's
So
awesome. Okay, cool.
I don't water ski. I've never water skied.
Okay. So what about a romantic vacation to the tropics or a romantic vacation to Europe?
Europe.
Okay. Working with Colton Cockrell with Share McKinley Group, the best financial advisor around, or some other person?
Absolutely, Colton.
Man,
I'm with you, man.
great answer. I love it. Okay. And last question. What is and this is not a either or, what is your favorite movie that somewhat talks about real estate or has real estate involved?
The Big Short.
Oh, okay. Nice. I still haven't seen it, but I really
You know,
need to see it because it's such a cool story.
if you ask me to name the top 5 real estate movies, The Big Short, and then I struggle to think of very many.
Well, technically,
So,
there's real estate in a lot of movies, right? So,
but is it the focus? There could be a character that kind of has a cameo in real estate or something like that. But
oh my gosh,
I'll
Brian,
need to research that one.
you definitely are a very sarcastic person. I love it, but you're also very professional. So, thanks for joining me for coffee. I
Absolutely.
think I speak on behalf of both of us when I say we probably need to get back to work. So, thank you for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to more conversations in the future. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Colton.
All right. See you later.